Welcome, everybody. We're here with Rylan Gleave, the second place winner of our Septet division, and an honorable mention in our trio category, all the way from Scotland. Thanks for spending some time with us, Rylan.
Hi, yeah, no problem at all. Nice to meet you, see everyone.
Yeah. So, why don't we just get started? Can you tell us about yourself, where you're at in your career, some of the music you've written, just the most interesting way of giving us your bio possible?
Jeez, okay. um, so I'm currently studying a master's degree at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. Just finished my first year of the 2-year course. I did my undergraduate degree there as well. Finished that last year, so I've just gone straight into the masters. I previously studied at Cheetham School of Music in Manchester as a singer, definitely not as a composer. It still feels like a really recent thing. I know it's been about 5 years, but it still feels like I'm a bit of an imposter, a bit of a fraud, just a singer who's worked my way into the compositional world. Um, and then prior to that, just sort of schools around Manchester. Um, yeah, brief background.
Cool. Rylan, can you talk a little bit about your musical inspirations? That can go with instruments. I see there's a guitar in the back. You mentioned sax.
Yeah.
um, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your inspirations.
Yeah, so I guess training as a singer for so long, I really am drawn to writing for voices and occasionally to wind instruments. Just kind of the idea of like breath and like perceived effort that goes into breathing is really interesting. I dabble a bit on a multitude of instruments, including said guitar, a bit of piano, violin very badly, just for fun. Like influence wise, don't listen to as much classical music as I used to. I think being a singer, I got sick of it quite quickly, and had to sing like a lot of kind of very standard arias and stuff. So my listening nowadays falls more into people like Lingua Ignota and Common Ida, King Ida, Sarah Henney's a bit more contemporary classical. A lot of David Fennessy. I was privileged enough to study with him quite a bit. Elizabeth McConkie, Crawford Seeger, Florence Price. It's kind of a diverse range of different styles and tastes.
Yeah, could you talk just a little bit about your process for composition? That's a very diverse thing, and I find that composers who also start out as instrumentalists and singers as being the end product of the music being the output have an interesting way of thinking about the way they input stuff in their creative process.
Yeah, good question. Big question. I guess I sing a lot of things to myself. So I think a lot of sort of melody and harmony definitely comes from me just kind of warbling away in my bathroom or whatever. Um, I have very recently got into slightly more extended score study. Like I've historically been quite bad at like looking at how people write things and just kind of listening to it and appreciating it, but not necessarily analyzing it in the same way. So I've been enjoying doing that recently, and I think that's led into sort of better notation and better material because it can be notated in that way. Um, I occasionally trial things out on the piano. I've moved away from opening Sibelius and just trying to start there. I feel like that can really dull down what I'm trying to do, and you get like a very Sibelius piece that comes out of it. So yeah, moving away from that, I guess.
Very cool. Well, could you talk a little bit about the pieces that you submitted for our call for scores? Maybe could you start with the septet?
Yeah, yeah. So I've never, prior to these pieces, written for any kind of brass ensemble. So like brass within an orchestra one or two times. But yeah, just really relished the opportunity and the challenge to take on just a big honky brass septet. Um, and yeah, again, was really struck by the idea that sort of diverse communities were being encouraged to step up for this kind of challenge. Um, and yeah, wrote a piece about my partner and me and how navigating, I guess, relationships as non-cis queer youth can be very different to like either straight cis youth or um, any other variant. And like, yeah, I think a lot of my music revolves around identity, and I don't want to say exclusively politics, but yeah, pretty hefty social political influence. So yeah, wrote a nice big funky brass piece about stability in a relationship, which is a fairly new thing for me.
Yeah, I love the work. I got really excited. I say this every time we interview someone because I think almost everyone we've spoken to thus far has submitted multiple works and got recognized for all their works. But anyone who submitted more than one piece, I did my own snooping. And the septet is, I think it's fantastic. It's very expressive. And this idea of stability, just by itself, the chaos that kind of ensnares inside the septet is really exciting. I'm really excited to show people what we're talking about, and come the fall and actually put on a show. Could you talk a little bit about your trio as well?
Yeah. So that was actually written prior to the septet as a sort of almost like a warm up, I guess, for writing the septet, which worked out quite well. And yeah, I think it was an exploration of more ugly timbral music than the septet was. I think the septet, I kind of reined that in a bit more. But yeah, I also enjoy writing works about my neurodiversity. I think it's really underrepresented, and yeah, I think important to discuss within the contemporary music climate, as are LGBT stuff issues as well. But yeah, I think neurodiversity often kind of gets left a little bit behind. And yeah, explored some ugly sounds. I guess as a form of, I don't know, kind of processing therapy, maybe. Yeah. Sorry, bit of a ramble.
No, it makes total sense. I remember looking at the score and seeing you play lowest note. There are a lot of instructions that speak to this frustration, this anger, and speaking politically. Jose and I are, of course, in the great country of the United States of America. Things are rather frustrating at the moment, but yeah, these expressive things, they come across really cleanly and really obviously, not just in the score as you were talking about the notation, but just in the sound that comes from it. And I'm really excited to show the audience again all of these words will eventually turn into actual sounds.
Yeah, no, that's a really exciting thing to think about. As a still fairly young composer, I struggle with the sheer amount of music I write that just is never going to be performed. There aren't a ton of opportunities for me, and so I just was so thrilled getting that email going, I'm going to get a recording of a new piece. And yeah, absolutely so exciting. So huge thanks for that.
Thank you, Rylan. Earlier you mentioned that you're a young composer. I'm wondering, how long have you been composing? When did you start?
It was my last 6 months in school, so I was nearly 18, and I've just turned 23. So not particularly long. Sometimes it feels longer than other times. I had applied to all of conservatoires as a mezzo soprano, and was originally going to go to the Royal Welsh Conservatoire to be a mezzo soprano there, and then went on a composition short course at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. And the head of department who was teaching then was saying to me, look, like, this is really, really cool stuff that you're bringing in. And I was like, oh, thanks. I just kind of do it for fun. I enjoy it, but I don't really see what else there is to it, I guess. And he said, well, why didn't you think about going to study here? I said, well, you've already rejected me as a singer. You didn't want me. I'm going to go to the Welsh. And he was like, no, as a composer. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah, term starts in like 2 weeks. And he's like, yeah, just go and talk to the admin office. Like, it'll be totally fine. Just come and be a composer. And yeah, it felt like a really last minute decision. I think my family were like, why? Like, why? Like, you've been training for this thing for like 4 or 5 years, and now you've suddenly decided that you're gonna go to Scotland and write music. I was like, yep. So yeah, sort of 5-6 years been properly writing music.
Do you have any beautiful, pretty words or inspirational words that you would like to mention for anybody who may be watching and listening, to people who are learning and young and wanting to maybe dip their feet in composition, or maybe people who are from underrepresented communities who want to see more representation?
Uh, yeah, there's definitely stronger role models than me. I'm still kind of dipping my feet in this industry, hoping to make some progress in it. But yeah, there are definitely better people to speak to. I think something that I really struggled with was being told by like just teachers at school who I don't think meant anything poorly by it, but were quite discouraging due to being from either some of these underrepresented groups or being classified as autistic. They have this preconceived idea that you should go and do something that is, I don't know, useful or more traditionally productive. And I don't think a lot of the time your own wants are taken into account in the same way that your holistic peers are. So yeah, don't be discouraged by people who think that they know what is best for you. Ultimately, you know yourself better than anyone else thinks they might.
I think that's great. And speaking of, better, lesser role models, or the phrasing of that, I think it's important not just to have the tippy top, those who have attained a high degree of fame, but it's also just like people, you can succeed at any level of this. You can be a student, you can be a trans student, or an LGBTQ plus student, or neurodivergent, and simply just work your hardest and see what happens. I think that's one of the biggest things, in my opinion, is that there shouldn't be a different level of or a different standard that other people have to be held to, only because it's less common, or it may not even be in like you said, they may not even be actually wanting to say harmful things, but it's just it's just something that's been ingrained in the system.
Absolutely.
I was curious. You were mentioning most of your music being so highly political. How do you have any other works that you feel express some of these thoughts? Do you have any highly provocative works that you'd like to talk about?
Um, oh, okay. I wrote a piece called "Distinguished Guests" a few years ago. I think it's one of the first pieces that I've not actually binned. There's still a link to it, and it's a few years old, so it's doing well. I would definitely do a second version and kind of revisit it or whatever. But it was addressing the fact that in classical concert halls, we still very much use the phrase "ladies and gentlemen," which is pretty exclusionary, especially to a lot of musicians, even at my conservatoire. And they kind of roll it out every time, "ladies and gentlemen," and you see a good 5-10 people going. So yeah, it addressed the fact that we could very easily say in a formal setting, "distinguished guests," and nobody's kind of left out from that. But the piece was myself pre-recorded screaming. I sing in a heavy metal band, so it was just full-on screams with my partner playing like really heavy drums, and I was kind of in my very posh formal suit up at the front of the stage, just kind of lip syncing with a nice black choral folder, lip syncing along to the screaming. So there's a bit of a disconnect between audio and visuals, which I think has been described as provocative, also lectury, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's I love that. To me, honestly, I'd never even thought of that, and I that I think that's a brilliant piece. I'll have to track down that that recording.
I'll send you a link.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel I guess this does have to be filled. Did your step into composition, was that something that it encouraged your political and expressive nature, or would you feel like you were already doing that as a vocalist?
I've never thought about that, but I don't think I was doing that as a vocalist. No, I don't think I was really self-aware enough to have figured out anything that was kind of beyond the own four corners of my own brain. I think transitioning from a school student to a university student, and from being transitioning in that sense, I transitioned straight into this weird white male privilege that I'd previously never experienced. I think I got a lot more political instantly because I suddenly had this whole new perspective on how people experience life and are treated by friends, colleagues, strangers, family. And I think, yeah, that really pushed me into wanting to make more of a noise about important issues, because I had this platform and people were listening to me, which I previously hadn't had. And yeah, I really believe that we should be using the platforms that we do have to hold up the people who should be listened to and don't have platforms.
So using your platform, or hoping to to speak and to be heard by people who have more control over the grander platforms, those who control the conservatories and the orchestras and things like that. What are some things that you would like to see changed? You already mentioned the denouncing of just the simple ladies and gentlemen. That is a big step that is inclusive, and it's just something that people don't even think about. It's something that's almost secondary to just what we've become accustomed to.
Absolutely. I think tiny microaggressions like that are riddled into contemporary classical music and the history of classical music. The debate over saying soprano or alto, gendering voices. Should we not specify ranges for voice? Should we not just say high voice if it's appropriate? I think there's a multitude of issues at the conservatoire I'm studying at the minute, out of people's genuine miseducation and misinformation, and a lot of it isn't coming out of malice, but the students are now starting to say, look, we also have a voice and we are responsible for making this society better than the one that we approached it in. Students of color have had guest lecturers say fairly inappropriate things without meaning to be inappropriate, but have just said it without thinking. I know there's been issues with some other trans students who are really struggling to get lecturers to take them seriously, to have even term reports gendered correctly, which feels ridiculous. Feels like it should be second nature. But again, all these really small things. I think on a wider scale, there's a fair amount of work that does need to be done, but it ultimately starts with education. It starts with not just giving students a place where they can access education fairly, but giving educators the resources that they need in order to treat students fairly. And I think that would have more of a bearing on how the current contemporary music climate works than a lot of other things.
Thank you. Man, you're so awesome. I just want to say that.
Thanks.
But moving forward, can you kind of give us the insight of what's next? What's next for you, Rylan?
That's for me. I've been commissioned by the Nevis Ensemble for Scotland's street orchestra. Very cool. I'm writing a saxophone piece for Jenny Ackroyd at the minute. It's part of their Years of Coast and Waters tour. So I've been paired with a member of the public who's got some sort of connection to Scotland's coasts and waters. I've been paired with a sea captain from the Fletcher group. She's really cool. And I know nothing about the sea, and she knows nothing about contemporary music. So initially we had this weird disconnect. She's like, well, I'm captain. And I'm like, I write music. What do we talk about? But she ended up telling me this fantastic story about being off the north coast and seeing the sea carpeted with jellyfish, almost like disco lights, just kind of really gently, softly moving. It's just this really beautiful image. So I'm writing a piece about jellyfish, which the BBC are going to premiere in a few weeks. Other than that, cracking on with the second year of my master's portfolio. Got a couple of ideas. I've just finished the previous folio for this year, so I feel like I've really thrown myself into a lot of work recently. So I'm gonna finish the saxophone piece, maybe have a week to myself, and write something cheesy. I'm working on a piece. I've just finished it for Scunthorpe Junior Cooperative Choir, commissioned by Dr. Paul Whitaker, OBE, and these little youth choir people are going to sing a nice little, really tonal, very accessible song. I think using Zoom or some kind of digital recording should be fun. Other than that, yeah, master's portfolio. Let's get it done.
Very cool. With this, with this being your final year in the master's program, and I would just be curious what, if you had maybe just more time, or if the school allowed you to, what would be the piece that you would love to write just, for your own expression? What's the dream piece?
I've actually really lucked out this year and been given a sort of 45-minute slot in our contemporary music festival next year, so sort of this time next year, which is, it can essentially, as long as it's not too many people, be whatever I would like it to be. So I'm using recordings of myself as a mezzo soprano, which is sort of 14, some of them younger, singing the Voice Septet aria from Figaro. And I sing it about 2 octaves higher than I can currently sing it. Yeah, it's just weird that I have all these like historically documented performances of a voice that doesn't exist anymore. And I also have some hilariously funny recordings of me trying to sing it in the few weeks that my voice was breaking, and it just splits and cracks everywhere, and it's just so ugly. So I'm writing a piece for track, live vocalist, which I'll be doing, bass drum, piano, and cello. That's going to be kind of lots of little different segments, almost kind of like an album, I guess, or 45-minute album length. That's going to be not quite semi-staged, not quite fully staged, a fairly large theatrical element to it. British Sign Language interpreted, projected text, fully accessible. That hopefully will go ahead this next May, I think it will be. Yeah, kind of big exploratory work.
Very cool. And is there anything coming up? I know the disease is making everything complicated, but is there anything coming up with your metal band?
I don't think so. We were booked for a couple of different things, but a lot of them have been cancelled. We have an album out, which is on Spotify. It's on YouTube. It's on everything. We're working on the second album, which is very nearly finished. And I think hoping to start recording that as soon as lockdown here has eased up a little bit, and it's kind of safe to do so.
Awesome. Well, that's a rare thing, because now I've had the running joke of saying that your website will be shared on this page and stuff like that. I have to see if I can fit a Spotify link to your band's album, because I think that's incredible. I think one of the things that I've really appreciated from getting to know you and your music is just the expressiveness, just not only in the way you're speaking about some of these things, but everything that you've put on paper has a very clear human I keep saying expression. I should probably learn a synonym for that. But it all is sound related to meaning. There's a lot of associations in your music, and it makes me very excited to be able to put on a concert of it in hopefully soon time.
Well, thank you so much. That's really kind, and I really appreciate those words coming from you.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Rylan, for coming at us from Scotland. It's been a joy to speak with you. I know it's later here than it is here in a sunny afternoon in Texas. So thanks for spending some time with us, and everyone. Stay on the lookout for some more news about Rylan's music. Visit his website, which is somewhere on the screen. Okay. And you'll be hearing about Rylan's music really soon. So be well, everyone. See you.